Well, welcome everybody. Appreciate you guys skipping the Astros game and coming to the first ever City of Manvel Budget Town Hall. So I appreciate you being here. We are recording this meeting, and so afterwards we will post it online, this town hall, so that way those who aren't able to make it, I know there's Church on Masters Road is having a service tonight, FFA's meeting tonight, the Astros are playing, but I appreciate y'all being here. We do have coffee, cookies, and water in the back. Cookies are individually wrapped to make sure that we abide by all ordinances and requirements. And then we also have a paper back there that has the slides. So that way, if you want to take any notes throughout the town hall, you can do so. So we'll go ahead and kick this off here. Myself and interim city manager Dan Johnson are going to be tag teaming this tonight, kind of bouncing around. And really what we want to do is address questions that we get asked a lot, that I know Jessica gets asked, or the chief gets asked, or city council members get asked, and provide some clarity and insight into what is the budget, how is the budget made up. But what I first want to do is introduce you to the individuals that I have the privilege and honor of serving with. We have a few of those individuals here tonight. We have Councilman Ed Perry, who is here, Councilman David Lands, and Councilwoman Sarmiento. I appreciate each of you being here. Councilman Jerome Hudson, who is also our mayor pro tem, he is out of town right now visiting family in Chicago, but he said that he will be watching online after the fact. Also, who's not here is Councilman Larry Acree and Councilman Harry Oplager, but they said that they'll make sure to watch after the fact, and if y'all have any questions, you can certainly reach out to them, send them an email, and touch base with them. So what's the goal for this budget town hall? What we want to do is make sure that we are proactive in being transparent and finding ways to collaborate on what the city does. Many times when people look at a budget, they see this big binder filled with information, but they're not sure what to make of it. And what we want to do is try to simplify that, make it digestible, because at the end of the day, the money that funds the budget is your dollars. It's your tax dollars one way or another. And so finding ways to be open and communicate about that is extremely important, not just for myself, but I believe I can speak for my fellow council members and saying that's important for them as well. And one of the things that we've done and what we'll start doing with these budgets moving forward is assigning a theme to the budget. What is the budget looking to accomplish? In this year's budget, the theme that we put is back to the basics. We want to make sure that we properly fund our essential services because that's the foundation that we build everything off of. And we have so much opportunity heading into the future, but if we're not taking care of the basics, if we're not taking care of the essentials, then there's an old parable that a house built upon sand will tumble over whenever a storm comes. But a house that is built upon the rock will withstand the test of time. And that's what we're looking to do. And so with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to our interim city manager, Dan Johnson. You got the Dan and Dan show tonight, and he's going to talk through the next few pieces of information.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, good evening. My name is Dan Johnson. I'm the interim city manager for right now, still serving as the city engineer as well and the floodplain manager and a few other things. But appreciate y'all coming out tonight. So the question is, what is a municipal budget? Hopefully we're all familiar with a budget. You know, we have a household budget. And what you do is, of course, you list out all of your expenses for the month, your mortgage and your car notes and your electricity, if you can get your mind wrapped around whatever your electricity bill is going to be, and cable or internet or whatever you have, and then you put in how much your salary is every 2 weeks or every week or every month or whatever. So a regular budget's pretty straightforward. A municipal budget's a little bit different because you don't have those recurring, monthly salary checks coming in, so to speak. Most of our revenue comes from property tax, sales tax, and those kind of things, and we don't get those on a regular basis. Some of those we only get once a year, in fact. And another big portion of our revenue comes from permits and inspections. Well, we can anticipate how many homes and how many businesses and things are going to come in a year, but it's not a guarantee. It's a projection, right? So a municipal budget is kind of a tricky thing to put together. There's a lot of assumptions that you have to make, quite frankly, and they are projections. So we'll talk a little bit about those right here. So some of our revenue sources, again, we've got property taxes, sales tax, grants. Hopefully, if we can get federal grants or state grants, or there are a lot of grant opportunities, and we're looking into those constantly. Fees for services. So, as much as we don't like paying for a permit to do this or that, there are only so many ways that the city can really bring in revenue in order to take care of all expenses that we've got. So, what are all those expenses? Well, we've got obviously departmental expenses such as the police department, public works, development services, administration. We're paying for electricity right now for the air conditioning and the lights and everything to be on. Our wastewater treatment plants and our water plants, those all have electricity that goes to them. They've got internet run to them in case something goes down in the middle of the night. They can call our guys out to come check on things to make sure that the water's back up and running and make sure that the wastewater treatment plants are running. We also have debt service. So, just like most of us are when we buy our house, we don't get to write a check most of the time unless you're, very well off or up in years. So you have to borrow money, and the city's no different. In order to build our new police station, we had to borrow money. In order to purchase land years ago, we had to borrow money. So there's a debt service. We obviously have to make sure that we pay back our debtors. Those are usually through bonds instead of a mortgage or a loan, so to speak. They're usually through some type of a bond. So we have to make sure that we're repaying those, including the interest and the principal on those. Then we also have reserve funds. So some funds are set aside just for emergencies. The rainy day fund is a real thing. You can't set aside enough money for a Hurricane Harvey. You can't do it. But you can prepare as best as you can to have some money there accessible if and when the emergency comes. You also have to plan for contingencies. We had a great example out in Rodeo Palms just 2 weeks ago. A huge portion of the road completely failed without warning, essentially. So that wasn't in the budget, so we had to pull from reserves to go out there and replace it, because it's a pretty important road in that subdivision. So that's a perfect example. And then also future projects. Eventually we want to have parks in this city. We talk about parks a lot, but right now we don't really have very many parks. We have Croy Park, out on County Road 58. And so we try and set aside funds for those. We try and set aside funds for vehicle replacement. Vehicles only last so long, equipment only lasts so long, so we have to put money away for those as well. And that leads us into capital projects. Again, we've got parks, we've got utility services like a new wastewater treatment plant. Ours is just about out of capacity already, our wastewater treatment plant is. So we need to expand that. We need to plan for that. It's extremely expensive to treat wastewater, extremely, about $40 a gallon, if you can believe that. So we have to plan for those things. We have to plan for buildings. We just built this building 3 years ago, and we're already full. We're already to the max in this building as far as personnel goes. And then the last one is transfer. So sometimes we have to transfer funds from one account to the other, and the very important ones obviously come up to council so that it's all transparent, like the mayor said a minute ago. So that's revenues and expenditures. Now that's all occurs within a fiscal year. So what is a fiscal year? And I hear a lot of people, probably drives Rosie crazy. Rosie is our finance manager. When people say physical year, it's not a physical year, it's a fiscal year. Our fiscal year happens to be from October 1 to September 30th. So it's shifted from a normal calendar year to help us with anticipating the revenue that comes in from the county and sales tax and those kind of things. So it's just shifted slightly. I think most cities in our area do that October 1 on. So if you hear that term, that's what that's all about. Let's see, is this still me, Mayor? Yeah. So how do we come up with a budget? Like the mayor mentioned, the budget document winds up being this monstrous binder that we spend a lot of time in preparation. This is my first one to be on this end and preparing one. I've been looking at budgets for 20 years, but on this end, I have a new respect for what it takes to put these together, because there's just a lot to it. There really is. So I don't know, see how well we can see this. Am I allowed to step out here? Is that okay? Good. Okay, so where are we? All the way over the far left, initial assessment of the current budget. So let's look at our budget that we've got from last year. Let's start there. That's a good place. Are we way over in training and travel, for instance? We're trying to get our guys up and what's a good example? Our certifications, we're trying to make sure that they're certified in what they're doing. Did we blow the budget, or are we about to? We need to look at that. Or are we, did we end up buying more blue pens than we had anticipated when the year started, more paper supplies and those kind of things? A good example was, Brooke, you sent out the questionnaire not too long ago. That was more postage than we normally budget for, right? So we look at the initial state of the current budget and sort of trying to anticipate what's coming for the next year. We get the department heads involved. Hey, Jessica in Development Services, what do you see coming up this next year? Robbie in Public Works, what do you see coming up? Well, our backhoe it's on its last leg. We're going to have to buy a new backhoe, for instance. Or, wow, permits have really slowed down. We need to adapt accordingly. So we get our department heads involved. We obviously get our council involved. Council, what are some of the needs that you're hearing? Especially, we've got an election every year with new council members coming on. So what are you hearing when you're out there campaigning? What are the things that you're hearing? If there's ordinances that we need to change, if there's something that we need to put more money into roads, or we need to repair a bridge or something like that, then let us know. Let's put that into the budget as best as we can. So we start preparing this budget document. We've had several meetings with council. This year's been a little compressed. We've had some turnover at the staff level, so it's been a little bit compressed from normal. Well, really, the budget is going to be a year-round event. It really is. And so we're going to get started on next year's budget almost immediately after we finish this budget in October. So City Council reviews the budget, and one of the questions, I guess I can't jump there, but it's a natural question. We're already talking about tax rate, and we're talking about the budget. It's a little crazy to me, but we have to actually have council adopt the budget first, and then the tax rate gets set. It's still odd to me. It seems like it should be the other way around, but that's not us. That's the tax code, right? The tax code and the state law. So anyway, as we get into that a little bit later, what you've heard so far is council has already, they've set the ceiling for the tax rate. So we can't go any higher than what they've already said. We can go lower, but we can't go any higher than that without actually going to a vote, and we've already missed that deadline and everything, right, Tammy? So the budget hearing is held and the tax rate hearing is held. So September 5th, the day after Labor Day, will be our next council meeting. And do we have a hearing that night? We do, don't we? Yep. And then hopefully September 18th. 18th will be the actual budget getting adopted. That'll be the night that the tax rate hearing is held and everything too. So ultimately, if the final budget gets approved that night, then it will go into effect on October 1. You doing revenues? Or you want me to? Still me? Okay, so for this coming up year, our revenues are anticipated. Again, that's anticipated. So we don't know exactly. I mean, if development completely stopped and no more new homes got built, that number is not going to be $15,106,650. But that's our best guess. That's a poor word to use, but it's our best anticipation. Folks that are demographers that look at demographics, I bet they just pull out their hair every year. Especially working for a school district or something. You're trying to anticipate how many people are going to move to the area. You don't really know. You can look at trends, you can look at projections, but you don't really know. So that's our most educated guess. Somewhere around 15 million. And where do those revenues come from? Again, the significant portion comes from ad valorem taxes, which are property taxes. And that's almost 40%. And the other big one, of course, is licenses and permit revenues. That's around 31%. Anything else big I want to tell you about on that one? Miscellaneous tax revenues, the one down there at the very bottom, that's sales tax. Sales tax isn't as big as you might think just yet. We don't. Hopefully things will change after H-E-B and McDonald's and all those folks out there at Manvel Town Center. Once those get up and running, hopefully we'll start seeing some more sales tax. There's one other one I could mention. That TERS there. That's kind of a complicated little thing to talk about. But the other sources right there, the TERS. If you ever hear about that TERS, T-I-R-Z, it's a tax increment reinvestment zone. It's a pretty big zone, mainly consisting of Meridiana, but it also comes out here onto Highway 6. So it comes all the way actually to this 7-Eleven right next to us. This is all in the TERS. So In order to, I guess, entice the developer, 15 years ago, 13 years ago, in order to entice the developer, there were negotiations made where all of the upfront costs are taken care of by the developer. So the overpass that's built there on Meridiana Parkway, a significant amount of infrastructure. We're aware of at least $80 million of infrastructure that they've put in already. Well, how do they get reimbursed for that? Did they just do that because they're the Rockefellers? And, no, they did not. They need to get reimbursed. And so they get reimbursed over time through the property taxes. So basically, when the property taxes come in Meridiana, they come in and they go back out through the TERS. Sales tax is similar, although that one's 50%, right? So for every dollar, essentially, that would go into 7-Eleven, instead of that full dollar coming to the city, half of it goes back in to reimburse the development itself. So that's another source of revenue there. I think that's probably enough on that one. What are taxes? Now that's you.
So what we want to do, talking about taxes, is break down what makes up your taxes. Because a lot of people, I have people that reach out to me a lot of times, and they get their tax bill, and they think that they pay $12,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year in taxes all to the city of Manvel. And that's not the case. Now, why do we pay taxes? Matthew 22:22 says, "Pay unto Caesar what is Caesar's." And a part of the social contract that we live in, choosing to live within the city limits, is that we pay taxes. And we also expect to get certain services with those taxes that we pay. And we have public hearings because, not just because state law mandates it, but we also want to hear from you. We want to know, is the budget, the way that it's constructed, something that you as a community are in support of? Taxes going up and down, staying the same, what do you want to see as a community? And so as Dan mentioned, the public hearings that are coming up are vitally important. If you come to the next one on the 5th, you'll actually see me in Shadow Creek football gear because Manvel lost to Shadow Creek, and it's a part of the wager with Mayor Cole. I will have to be wearing that all night, and I'm going to be itching throughout the entire time. But please come out and sign up to speak and participate. It's important. But let's talk about who collects taxes. If you live within the city limits, most of these areas tax you. Most of these entities tax you. Now, not everybody is taxed by every single one. So anybody that lives within city limits, you have a tax rate that is applied to your value of your home by the city of Manvel. You also have a tax rate by Brazoria County, which is technically two parts. You have one that goes to the county government itself, and then a portion of that also goes specifically to the Road and Bridges Department. Then you have your Alvin Independent School District that you pay taxes to. I get asked a lot, why do people in Manvel pay taxes to Alvin? Well, the Alvin Independent School District makes up 3 different cities, Alvin, Manvel, and even parts of Pearland. I believe it was back in the 70s or 60s that the citizens of Manvel had their own Manvel schools, but actually voted at that point in time to go in and to be a part of the Alvin School District. And the reason why Alvin ISD extends up into Pearland as well is Pearland ISD didn't want to jump over to the other side of 288, which is why you see a lot of Shadow Creek Ranch that goes into the Alvin Independent School District. Now, if you're over 65, you have your school taxes frozen. And then what goes into effect on September 1st by the state is for anybody that's not over 65, I believe, your homestead exemption for school taxes increases from $40,000 to $100,000. So you're going to start to see that come up with your school taxes. We also, in Manvel, we have Alvin Community College that we pay taxes to. And then I believe everybody in Manvel city limits pays ESD taxes as well to our emergency services district. So another decision that was made in the past was that instead of the city of Manvel having its own fire and emergency response from an ambulance standpoint, they voted to join and participate in an emergency service district that covers Manvel, Iowa Colony, Liverpool. It extends a big portion of Brazoria County. Now, there's two here that not everybody pays taxes to in the city. One is a municipal utility district, or what's called a MUD. So I live in the Lakeland subdivision. We live in a MUD. A MUD is just similar to a TERS. It's a way for this board to be formed and this entity to be formed that levies an additional tax on the people who live inside of that MUD to ultimately reimburse the developer for the developer's costs towards infrastructure. So in Lakeland, we're in MUD 61. Our top portion of our tax bill, which I'll get to this next, is Alvin ISD. Our second biggest portion is to the MUD, and then our third biggest portion is to the city. So a lot of people, if you live on Mississippi or if you live off of Rogers, you don't pay into a MUD, but a good portion of Manvel is inside of a MUD. The other is a drainage district. Pretty much all of Manvel is in a drainage district except for the Oakcrest area, which is right off of Hanselman, Twin Oaks, Live Oak, and Oakcrest, as well as Gates Loop. That's the only area in Manvel that is not in the drainage district. So we have DD4, Drainage District 4, that covers the northern portion, comes alongside the far western portion. CNR 3, Conservation and Reclamation 3, takes up a big chunk, and then Drainage District 5 comes along the bottom portion. The drainage district's responsibility is exactly that, to make sure that drainage is improved and that water flows and it doesn't flood your homes. And the city has a responsibility to partner with the drainage district in making sure that we address your drainage issues. So let's give a practical example here, a scenario for you guys to actually see what this breakout looks like. And this is a very handy graphic that Brooke put together. I like it a lot. Dan asked her when we were doing a run through, oh, where'd you find that graphic at? And she's like, oh, I made it myself. So good job on that. But this is, we'll take Blue Water Lake subdivision as a scenario. So you're located in Brazoria County, in the city. You are in MUD 66. You have the school district, the community college, the ESD, and you're in CNR 3. So as you can see here, your biggest portion is Alvin ISD at 38% of your tax bill. Then MUD 66 is at 26%. And the city of Manvel right there is 16% of your tax bill. So that's just a good visual to see that not all of your taxes goes to the city, and that it's important, while it's a lot of entities, for you to get involved and to speak up during those meetings. Because, for example, Brazoria County currently has a tax rate of 34 cents. Alvin ISD in this scenario has a tax rate of $1.37. ACC is 16 cents. While the city currently has a tax rate of 57 cents, the MUD for MUD 66 is at 92 cents. The drainage district is 15 cents, and then the ESD is 9 cents. So you can see a really good picture and illustration of how entities are also supposed to work together to make sure we serve the citizens and the taxpayers that we all ultimately represent. Let's talk a little bit about the history of our tax rate here within the city of Manvel. And this is actually something that Dan discovered recently. I think this goes back all the way. The far left side is 1998. And so you can see there were a lot of spikes up and down leading into about, I believe that is about 2007 is when you really saw it level out. And so what was different in the late 90s and early 2000s is that Manvel didn't see a lot of value of growth in the city. So the way that you increased revenue or decreased revenue was solely based off of the tax rate that you adopted. But starting in the early to mid 2000s, Rodeo Palm started to come online, then Lakeland came online, and then you've seen a lot of new subdivisions, which as the value in the city has increased, you should see, which you'll see it starting from about 2019. In 2018, council voted to increase the tax rate to 69 cents from 57 cents. And then you've seen as values go up, your tax rate goes down. So for the past 2 years, the tax rate has held steady at 57 cents. And what this proposed budget is based around is a tax rate of 56 cents. So this tax rate is the lowest tax rate that we've been able to find since 1998. Now, based off of your value, it could be a tax payment increase to the city. But it ultimately depends, it's tied hand in hand. How your value increases and the tax rate the city adopts ultimately determines your tax bill. But now that we explained a little bit about taxes, I'll pass it back over here to Dan, passing it to Dan, to talk about what do we provide with the taxes that we collect as a city.
Thank you, Mayor. So what do we provide with our portion? Logical question. Chief, this is not intended to call you out, but you are a significant user of the taxpayers' funds, and rightfully so. Almost 40% there goes to our police department. And it's really interesting. If you go back, and I've been helping the city since 2008. I was a consultant for many years, but I've been on staff for the last 3 years. It's really interesting to go back and read old minutes to council meetings. And I came across the minutes where council elected to hire a police officer, a full-time police officer. And about how many do we have now, Chief? How many full-time do we have? Should we say, or we keep them guessing? We have more than one. I'll leave it at that. I grew up in San Antonio, and there was a town down there that there were two police officers, there were two cop cars. And if you saw the one pulled someone over, and then the other one was underneath the sally port, then you knew you were in the clear because there was just two in town. So I don't want to give anything away. What are you comfortable sharing? About 36, almost 40 police officers. So that's a significant portion of where our expenses go, of course. Also administrative expenses. There are a lot of expenses associated with, like I said, with our facilities and with our personnel, of course, with salaries and benefits and all of those kind of good things. Library expenses. So we partner with Brazoria County, but still that's a portion of it. Not much. It's less than 1%, but it is a portion of it. Development services expenditures, and those are a little tricky because we've got expenditures in development services, but we also have revenues in development services. So we wouldn't need a bunch of building inspectors and plan reviewers if plans weren't coming in and buildings weren't needing to be inspected, right? So those two kind of go hand in hand. The more development that is occurring, the more help we need in the development services department. Another good example, so back in 2008, there was one gentleman, Jim Sullivan, if you knew him, and he handled all of the inspections in the entire city. All of them. It didn't matter what kind of inspections they were, but he did them all. We have grown a little bit since then. Last year, we did over 1,000 new home permits in the city of Manvel. So one human being cannot do that many inspections, of course. So development services about 10%. Public works, 17%. So I was putting together a chart earlier today, and I think I shared it with the mayors. And what I noticed is over, say, the last 10 years, one of the departments that hasn't been increasing sort of with the times is actually our public works department. If you could imagine I'll go like this. If you could imagine our police department going like that, and our development services and even our administrative services all at a certain slope, the public works slope is quite a bit flatter. And that might be something that we start talking about in this next budget year, because we get complaints, of course, all the time about roads, and hey, we need to resurface this asphalt road. 100% agree with you, but it is not cheap. Even asphalt roads are not cheap. And we look for every opportunity that we can. We partner with the county each year with an interlocal agreement, and they'll do up to 2 miles of roadway. All we have to do is pay for the materials. So that's a big help. Concrete roads, of course, are even more expensive. So we really want to make sure that when the developers build a concrete road, we've got inspectors out there to hopefully try and minimize what I mentioned happened in Rodeo Palms earlier. I think those are probably the biggest ones. What's the 15%? Oh, I mentioned that. Emergency management, code enforcement, fire marshal expenses, municipal court, obviously. All of those, they just add up quickly. That's our expenses right there. Where do we go? That's back to you, isn't it?
Handing it off here. All right. So let's talk about a little bit about where do we go now. Dan had spoken a little bit earlier about the overall process, and here's where we're at. Council has been actively reviewing the proposed budget and the tax rate. According to our city charter, the city manager is to present the budget on or before August 1st, and Dan was able to meet that deadline, I think, with about 3-4 hours to spare. So I know him and Rosie were burning the midnight candles to get that done. And we've been actively reviewing it. Prior to the budget being presented, we actually, as a team, worked with the department heads, and they gave a presentation, public presentation to City Council about each of their asks for their departments. Because in years past, the budget was presented and you saw it on August 1st for the first time. You had talked about in months prior, back in February, about kind of goals and priorities for the year. But then it wasn't until August 1st that it was presented, and at that point, it's a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper. Having the department heads like the chief and Jessica and Rosie and others stand up there and present what actually the substance is behind those numbers, I know for myself, and I heard from a lot of people in the community, that was important to them, because you actually got to see what the departments were asking for within the budget. You know, some of it made it and some of it didn't make it. So we had multiple workshops, and all of those were live streamed. You can find those on the city's Facebook and YouTube page, which we're going to have information at the end about how you can find that. And then when the budget was presented, we jumped into it, and we got an overview from Dan and Rosie. We've been making some adjustments, accounting for some different items that we wanted to make sure to include within the budget. And Dan's going to talk through what a few of those are. But what's going to happen, as Dan mentioned, is on September 5th and then on September 18th, we're going to have 2 public hearings, so 2 opportunities for you to come speak. And if you're not able to make it, then you can submit public comments in advance, and we'll make sure to read those publicly. And then what will most likely happen is on the 18th, we will vote on the budget and the tax rate. It requires a supermajority to approve the budget and the tax rate, which means that you have to have 5 individuals in support of it. If for whatever reason on the 18th we're not quite where we need to be with the budget, we can of course schedule some additional times to meet as a body, but the ideal situation is you don't rush it and wait until the 11th hour, that hopefully on the 18th we can find the necessary support in order to approve a budget and a tax rate. As I mentioned at the beginning, you know, what is the theme for the budget? And the theme is back to the basics. We want to just drill this down and not overcomplicate things. Take a very simple approach where I can explain it to my 9-year-old son or my 7-year-old daughter, and they understand what's happening within the budget. We want to simplify it for the community. We want to simplify it for the department heads. And we've asked them, what do you need in order to properly perform the basics of your job? When you look at your job description, what's the core of what that description is? And let's make sure that you have the support and that you have the funding in order to accomplish that. And what you'll see and what Dan's about to present here is what are some of those priorities in order to really focus on the essentials, minimizing the non-essentials. How can we make sure to take care of the current employees? Because as we invest in our current employees, they turn around and invest in our community. But you'll also see that we're doing things such as increasing funding for roads and for sidewalks. We're purchasing equipment that's going to go to serve to improve ditches and to do other core essential functions, such as helping Jessica out in the permit department and hopefully streamlining and answering questions for how to get a permit to do A, B, or C. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dan, and then I'll step up here at the end to go ahead and wrap us up.
Thank you again, Mayor. Some of the upcoming projects, I guess, that we want to talk about. We've already got over a dozen capital projects that are in the works right now. We're about to have our first water tower, an elevated storage tank out on 288, right there, just north of the Del Bello Lake subdivision. So that project's been in design for a while, and it's about to come to fruition. It'll be about a 1 million gallon tank. It's very exciting to have that kind of storage, you know, that elevated storage of water. So that's one project. We're obviously the new police station up on 1128. It's basically in the same location that it's been in for years now, just a little bit to the north of that. A little bit further to the north of that is the new Public Works building. If you've ever been to our Public Works building, it's a blessing that we have a facility. It's a blessing that it is still standing, quite frankly. It's old. It's close to the end of its life, and we have a pretty significant number of folks that are in Public Works. They need an area for training. They need it. What we really need is a place where the public can come in, and if they need to buy their water meter, for instance, they don't have to go next door to that building and then come over to here and then go to 3 different buildings to get a water meter. It's kind of what they have to do right now because we don't have the room to store a water meter. Okay, so, and if you want to go up to Public Works and you want to talk to somebody about your drainage on your road out in front of your house, you'll have a facility to actually do that. So I'm really excited about that new facility. That'll be on 1128. So those are a couple of capital projects. In order to make sure that those facilities are not on well and septic, we're running water and sewer up 1128, which will could open up some possibilities for commercial development as well. So those projects are in the works. Like I mentioned a while ago, this City Hall, just 3 years ago, thought that this would be it. Of course, I remember when we moved into Vela Insurance next door, and we thought that would be it. If you ever went to the old council meetings in basically Chief's living room, now, I mean, it's amazing how far we've come. And I can say that because I was here too as a consultant. And so, anyway, to think that we need more room, well, we do. It's just a fact of the matter. So we have many different projects going on. The gardens at Croy Park, that's a really beautiful project. Croy Park, of course, it's an interesting park because it's technically in our ETJ right now. It's not technically in the city limits. Obviously, being a park, it wouldn't pay property taxes anyway, so that doesn't affect us one way or the other. But we are trying to figure out a way to get that into our city limits proper. If at all possible. But we've done some pretty incredible improvements out there. If you've seen the new playground equipment, that's amazing. The kids love that, and it's got this century playground material underneath it. There's not the rusty bolts and all that kind of good stuff like it once was. But the next part is the gardens at Croy Park that sort of honors the existing park that's been there for a long time. So that project is underway as well. And then we've got it up here as community-driven strategic planning. So we have a comprehensive plan. We actually have updated it once. The first one I want to say was 2007, and then the second was 2015, I believe. But it's been a while, so it's time to update the comprehensive plan. And this time, now we have the internet obviously readily accessible, and we have a place where we can all get together. We used to always have to get together at Pastor Martin's place, or we had so many different opportunities where we'd have to try and get together. Many times we would meet in other cities to talk about our city. So it's crazy to think that we even have this room right here is a huge blessing. So this comprehensive plan update is also going to involve a strategic plan. So where, we have, it's not just Old Manvel anymore. It's not just New Manvel. How do we thread the needle of, the folks that have been here that have a road named after them, quite frankly, or roads. If you're a Del Bello, I don't know how many roads are named after the Del Bellos. Many. Spurs and roads and boulevards and all those kind of things. So how do we thread that needle from Old Manvel to New Manvel, and then how do we protect protect the future? So and then the last part of that strategic planning. So it's a strategic plan, a comprehensive plan update, and then a thoroughfare plan update. The thoroughfare plan it's good in the sense that we have lines on a map. It's not always practical. Some of the lines are drawn through, people's barns, or for instance, or whatever, or they go across a pond. So they were done many years. The plan was done many years ago by a planner, and now we know better on a lot of things. We have Google Earth and those kind of things. We can zoom in and see what's going on. So we need to update the thoroughfare plan. So that's all part of that project. It'll take about 1 year, and we're in the RFQ process right now, Brooke. Yeah, so I'm excited about that one. And then the last one that we have listed up here is the wastewater treatment plant. I mentioned that a minute ago. Just a very expensive endeavor, but it has to be done. And where that plant is designed to go is real close to the existing wastewater treatment plant, which is on Corporate. So if you know where you go to vote, right there at the annex, across the street well, actually down the street where the concrete plant is. That's where our sewer plant is right now. The new part of it would be on the other side of the road. So there's a big berm behind Blue Water Lakes. This is where that plant would go, and it would be a membrane plant and use ultraviolet light to treat instead of chlorine. So it's really exciting as far as the footprint that it takes up is much, much smaller than a traditional wastewater treatment plant. I won't get too geeked out about a plant because y'all probably don't want to hear about it. But anyway, there are a lot of projects going on, needless to say. Common misconceptions. This might be a tag team, huh?
Yeah, tag team a little bit here. And Dan's an engineer by trade, so when you start talking about wastewater treatment plants, he gets excited.
I didn't mention SCADA. Wait, who wants to talk about SCADA? I'm just kidding.
You can if you want. Go for it. But there's a few other things that I personally like that's been proposed within the budget. And I think it's important to clarify for the community. Regardless of what you think about the tax rate, you can still celebrate the successes within the budget. There are still good things that can be accomplished in the budget despite what your personal feelings might be for the tax rate. For example, it increases road funding by $150,000. The budget allows us to get some equipment to better clean out culverts, to make sure that water continues to move within the ditches. The budget goes and helps hire some key positions that have been needed for a while, such as an administrative assistant for our fire marshal's office, to make sure that while the fire marshal is out there performing the inspections, that the paperwork continues to process through. Valve kits for our public works department to make sure that we're properly testing our fire hydrants. Up to 2019, the fire hydrants had never really been tested in a methodical and strategic way. Well, that's a concern if you have a fire. Do you know and can you depend upon whether or not the fire hydrant is actually going to work? And so there's some good things in this budget, good things that have been proposed. One of the things that was very important to our interim city manager, and city council has agreed to this, is for our city employees who have dependents on their health insurance, incentivizing through a STEP program where the city will cover the dependent health insurance. So what has been proposed is that from 0 to a year, it's no coverage. Then from a year to 3 years, it's 50% coverage. And then when you stay longer than 3 years, if you have dependents and you want the dependents to be on the city's health insurance, it's 100% coverage. Because right now, the workforce, the demographics in the workforce show that most employees stay at their jobs for 2 to 3 years. And so if we can find ways at a low cost to keep the employees that we've invested in for the past few years, that we've helped get certifications, that understand which way the water flows, then I think those are important things that we should consider. But there's also some other low-hanging fruit that we're looking at regarding the budget, such as I mentioned a software. It's for $15,000, and it's a smart logic software that when you go to the city website, you start answering questions about what you're looking to get a permit for. And based off you answering yes to this question, then it populates and asks you these questions. But if you answer no, then it asks you a different set of questions. And so instead of you having to call up to permits and speak with Laura or speak with Elaine or speak with Joe's or Jessica, you actually can do this intuitively through the website that hopefully streamlines your experience. Now, of course, they'll always be there for you to pick up the phone or come up to City Hall and talk with those people. But if we can have a faster turnaround time for your permits, then that increases what, in the business world, your customer satisfaction. And ultimately, you as the tax-paying citizens, you're our customers. And we want to make sure that you are satisfied with the product that's being produced from City Hall. And one of the things that we're going to be doing here, and we should begin advertising pretty soon, is for a few different boards and committees, a business advisory task force, a development advisory task force, reforming the Parks and Recreation Board, taking a little bit of a different approach with the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee, and then also reforming the Events Task Force. And so we're really going to look for the community to be involved and engaged in that. But let's talk about some common misconceptions that people have, and I know I get asked a lot about, that I have to speak to regarding the budget. So the funds that come into the city can be spent on anything. That is not true. there are certain legal restrictions based off of how the funds come in. So for example, the fees that you pay if you're on city water and wastewater go into the utility fund and have to stay within the utility fund. When you pay a fine, if you get pulled over and you get issued a ticket and you pay the fine, that stays within a specific fund. If the city issues debt for specific projects, let's say, the city decides, oh, you know what, I don't want to do that project now, I want to do this other project over here. You can't take that money and move it over to this different project. So there are certain restrictions depending upon the fund that the money comes into, but generally speaking, your property tax and your sales tax funding generally you have more opportunities to move that around and flexibility with that. So here's another one. Taxes cover all costs. That's not true. What you generally see within a budget is that taxes will cover a portion of the budget, but what the city tries to do is any costs that are associated from an expenditure standpoint towards processing, permits, development plans, pre-development meetings, general development plans, generally you tie your fee for processing that to cover your cost. So instead of having to jack up the tax rate to an astronomically high amount to cover your costs, you look to these other areas that can supplement that, such as sales tax, such as other opportunities for funding. Another one that we cover that you see for all new development is impact fees. So when a developer will build in a community, what will happen is at some point in the process of building, because there is an additional pull on the infrastructure, the developer will pay an impact fee, which for water and wastewater is about $9,000. It allows the city to recoup costs of expanding infrastructure to the new areas, and so that new area helps pay for some of the cost for expansion. Another one is surplus funds are spent immediately, and that's not true. What you'll see within the budget is year after year, you'll see money that will potentially go into the unused fund balance that comes in different areas. You want to make sure that you have a certain percentage of your expenditures set aside within your fund balance in case there's an emergency that happens. For example, the city of Kemah is very sales tax dependent. And so whenever COVID hit and all of that sales tax revenue was just wiped away because nobody was going out, the city of Kemah had to lay off a lot of their municipal employees because they also didn't have a healthy fund balance in order to help cover them through those tough times. So you want to make sure that you have an ample amount of money to cover anywhere between, let's say, 3 to 6 months within your fund balance, but you don't want to have an excessive amount, in my opinion at least, because that's your tax dollars. And so let's make sure that we have a healthy fund balance, and then once we get to that point, then let's either give the money back to the people by lowering their taxes, or let's make sure that we use this in areas that actually serve the community, such as improving ditches or fixing roads. So here's another one. Funds can be easily moved around. So while that would be nice in some situations, Dan cannot just snap his fingers and say this money's moving from here to there. As Dan mentioned with Rodeo Palms, there had to be a budget amendment that followed a legal process where there was an ordinance that was presented to City Council for City Council to discuss and then vote on in order to move the money from our fund balance into the general fund in order to pay for the streets. So if you're moving money around within, let's say, the police department, because you have this overage or you have this, you need this money to help cover a deficit, if you're moving it around within a department, that's a lot easier to do. But if we wanted to take money from the chief and we wanted to give it to Robbie in public works, it's not as easy to do that because there's legal requirements that dictate transparency through the process. So now let's talk about the no new revenue rate versus tax decrease. So this is something that you hear talked about a lot. Just because the tax rate goes down does not mean that you are paying less in taxes. It's ultimately dependent upon the value of your home increase. Every year, the city is given a range of the tax rate that it can adopt. You have the voter approval rate, and then you have the no new revenue rate. That's given to us by the county. If the city wants to adopt a tax rate above the voter approval rate or at the voter approval rate, that automatically triggers an election where the people would have to, all of us would have to vote on whether or not we would want to see that tax rate adopted. So the city can adopt a tax rate without going to the voters either right underneath that voter approval rate or any further down. If the city wanted to, the city could say, you know what, we're not going to collect any property taxes this year. We're going to zero it out. But then, of course, we would not be able to fund what we need to fund to continue to operate as a government. So what you see happen is when the county proposes the range that you see, the no new revenue rate is generally perceived as the tax rate that, if adopted, you do not see your tax payment increase to the city. That's about 95% of the time that occurs. Within Manvel, because we're seeing such growth within the city, that's not necessarily the case. You also see sometimes you see cities like Pearland last year. Pearland has a 5% homestead exemption for all of the property owners that are homesteaded within the city. So the city of Pearland adopted a tax rate that was above the no new revenue rate, but because of the homestead percentage that they offer, the average homesteaded property actually saw a $40 decrease in their tax bill. So there's a lot of considerations that we as City Council will be taking into this budget cycle to make sure that we properly fund essential services while also setting the tax rate. So coming to the end here, and then I know we have a few questions that were submitted in advance that Dan and I will tag team on. We have a few ways that you can get connected with the city. Of course, come up here, visit us anytime. You can give us a call. We also have a website that is regularly updated by Tammy, Brooke, and the team. And we do have a very active social media presence where we are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and I believe we are on LinkedIn as well, if I'm not mistaken. So LinkedIn there, put that bubble there as well. This QR code down at the bottom, and I'll put this one back up if you want to scan the QR code. So that takes you to the city's website, correct, Brooke? And then through the city's website, there's actually ways where you can sign up to get notified either through a text message or an email when meetings are happening or whenever there's an emergency notification that needs to go out. For example, a few months back, they actually, in the Lakeland subdivision, had to do some flushing of the lines, and so they had to see the water pressure drop because, of course, they're flushing the lines. So everybody in Lakeland that signed up specifically got a notification saying, hey, just so you know, water pressure is going to be low for the next few hours. We're doing some flushing in the area. So it's a way for the city to be proactive in letting you know if things are going to be occurring in your area. So if you're not signed up or if you know people that aren't signed up, it's a great resource because it will also, in case of an emergency, will be a very active tool that we use to communicate. But before we go to the questions and answers, which is the next one, I do just want to express my appreciation to Brooke, Tammy, Rosie, Dan, and everyone else that they worked very hard to put this together tonight. The IT department helped us set up everything, helped us put together and get this projector and screen. And this is the first time that we've done this, and I think they did a phenomenal job with making sure we had cookies and waters and coffee. And so I just want to say thank you for your work on this, and I appreciate you guys. When I came forward with the idea, you guys all jumped right in and said, let's make it happen. So with that, Brooke, I'll turn it over to you. I think you got a few questions for us.
Yes, we had 3 questions that were submitted ahead of time. And this first one, I think, would actually be best answered by Mr. Dan Johnson. Kyle asks, with take-home vehicles, will the person be paying for gas, wear and tear, and maintenance of the vehicle? Will this person be on call 24/7? So I'm assuming the question here is what led to this decision to have our employees or some employees get issued take-home vehicles?
Sure, and that is a good question. So, and excuse me, many cities offer a take-home vehicle, of course. As it turns out, that's something that's been in our personnel policy for years, and the previous city manager just elected not to do it. I think there were only 2 folks that had a take-home vehicle before, and as I came into the interim situation, I was reviewing through the personnel policy and saw that was something that was left up to the city manager's discretion. So I sat down with my department heads that have on-call individuals, specifically Public Works, Fire Marshal, and the Police Department. And the concern I've always had, quite frankly, and I've seen it happen many times where, say the Public Works guy is coming, he gets called at 2 o'clock in the morning to come fix this water main break. And he's driving in, we'll just say from Alvin. And he drives right past the water main break in his own personal vehicle, drives down to Uzel or Uzzle, however you want to say it, and to go to the shop, and then gets the city truck, gets all of his tools, then comes back over here. We've just wasted 30 minutes, maybe an hour, and that's water just spilling all out over the ground. So on-call Public Works guys have the option of a take-home vehicle with the department head and the city manager's discretion. So there's a 3 or 4 page policy that we came up with that they have to sign to make sure that if they live in an apartment complex, they can't take it home there. If they can only park it out on the street, they can't take it home there. It's either got to be in their driveway or in their garage. So we've got some provisions like that. The original question was, what about the fuel? Yes, of course, the city is going to pay for their fuel and maintenance of the city vehicle. They also have to sign that they can't use it for personal use or anything like that. Now, if something happens and you're on your way home and your spouse calls and says, "Hey, can you pick up the groceries at H-E-B that's curbside or whatever?" Obviously we're not looking to try and, it's not to be a gotcha, okay, for heaven's sakes, but we're not going to go take vacations and those kind of things. We have GPS trackers on all of our vehicles so we can keep an eye on where they're going. If something happened and they got stolen, we can keep an eye on, where they're at too. So did I answer that one good?
Yes, I think so. So our next one goes out to the mayor. Thomas asks, what is the tax allocation of the total budget and how is it used, or how is its use available to the public? This will help me to understand as a community member where funds are being spent. I feel as though I am over taxes, but this data will help me to understand better.
Well, that's a great question by Thomas, and I think we covered that a lot within this slide, and we can rehash this out. What you see is the two departments that are usually the most public-facing for current residents is really the police department and then Public Works, which that right there makes up more than 50% of the current budget. At times, current residents might have questions or might have needs for development services, but that's generally if you're a current resident, if you're looking to build a barn or you're looking to dig a pond or you're looking to do some improvement with your property, or maybe you live in the city and you're looking to open a business with the city. That's where you would have the need for development services. So currently as it sits, over 50% of our budget is focused on community-facing needs and items, and that's really the way that it should be. But one of the focuses that we're going to be taking, not just in this budget, but as we really go and take a comprehensive approach to next year's budget and future budgets, is to not just do things because that's the way that it's always been done. We want to look at things and make sure that we have the right people in the right position, following the right process, and producing the right product. We want to ask the tough questions and have the tough conversations and not shy away from those because of whatever reason you might shy away from those. We want to make sure that this government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And with every budget, you're looking at ways and opportunities to refine and to improve the way that you do things, to work with the department heads and to work with the Manvel Police Association and to work with the community to say, how can we structure this to make sure that we honor our past and we take care of the present in order to prepare for the future. And so we're really going to look to take a comprehensive approach moving forward and make sure that we are always continually refining the way that we do things.
Perfect. And this last question comes from Emily. It says, can we get an update on road repair, Dogwood and Tarkasley, for example? And will there be another increase on property taxes is the second part.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll take part of it and then I'll turn it over to you, Dan. So we have quite a few roads in this city that were built many, many years ago that were not built to the standard to carry the traffic volume that they're currently seeing. And a great example of that is if you drive Dogwood, Pollard, Tankersley, Lewis, Charlotte, you'll see that a lot of those roads were built to dead end right where McCoy goes. But because the high school was built and because Lakeland was built, you're seeing a lot more through traffic on those streets. And those streets are just an example of what you see in a lot of different areas throughout our city with some of these older streets that have been there. And so to speak to Emily's question for specifically Dogwood and Tankersley, so Dan mentioned it, we have the ability with the county to partner through an interlocal agreement where we can submit up to 2 miles worth of roads every year to the county, and they will help us essentially redo those roads. They'll tear them up, lay down the asphalt, make sure it's done nice. We just provide the funding for the resources, but they provide the equipment and the labor. And so if you drive over here on Cemetery or Georgia or Louisiana, I believe, you'll see some of the work, the most recent work that was done. So we approved an interlocal agreement at our next city council meeting. And what it says is it allows the mayor to submit a letter to the city engineer to start the process for which roads are going to be worked on during this upcoming fiscal year. And I believe the roads that we're targeting for this upcoming fiscal year are going to be, do you have those?
I do. Wilson, Dogwood, Tankersley, Charlotte, and Cindy.
And so those are the roads that we're going to look on for this upcoming year. And then every year moving forward, we have the opportunity to continue to submit up to 2 miles worth of roads. And so Dan will speak next a little bit to the street maintenance program and how we're going to leverage that to take a data-driven approach to how we fix our streets.
Yeah, so asphalt streets, they don't all need to be replaced by concrete streets. That is a common misconception. And I'm a fan of asphalt streets, quite frankly. If you've ever if you drive a 3/4 ton truck or a 1 ton truck, you appreciate flexible pavement. You really do. You don't have all those expansion joints like concrete. Whenever you have bad weather, the issue with asphalt is it's so important to have a good base. If you don't have a good base underneath your road, it will fail and crack. And if it's not wide enough and the ditch, the roadside ditch starts eating the road, that's not a good situation. So the goal isn't to get rid of asphalt roads. Okay, so that's one misconception. But what has been done in the past is more patchwork, quite frankly, and a lot of times even the repairs were done with just cold mix asphalt because it's easier. It's way less expensive to just, you can buy that at Home Depot, to just basically put cold mix asphalt into a pothole. That's not a long-term solution. So the long-term solution is to do it the right way, which is making sure that you have a good base, making sure you have a good width to the road in the first place. And then if and when we have to do repairs, we do it with hot mix asphalt. And so we'll be smart about setting up different areas. If there's a big patch that needs to be done here, I know we just did one on Palmetto, but if we've got a big one here and a big one over on this road and this road, just like with a concrete pour, you plan that out so that you take care of several of them while you have the materials there present. So what hadn't been done until actually this year, this is the first year that we were able to put forth the street maintenance program that the mayor mentioned. And I'm really excited about that because what it does is it lists out all of our streets in the entire city. And then there was a vehicle that went and drove every single one of those, taking pictures, taking contours. It's a really amazing piece of machinery. And this was a third party that we hired to come out, and they gave a PCI, an index. Why did I just forget the name of it? Pavement Condition Index? There you go. A PCI for every single road. So they basically went through and objectively ranked all of the roads, okay? And then we can put them into a database and determine which roads we need to do right now, which roads we need to do very, very soon. If we repair this road, we might not have to reclaim the entire road. So we have a process for every year on how many roads to do and roughly how much that's going to cost. So again, this is the first year we've actually got to put that into practice, and so I'm excited about that. For better or worse, the first year's pretty easy on the pocketbook. it only starts getting more expensive. So what we don't want to do is like I mentioned to one of our council members earlier today, we don't want to let our foot off the gas. You don't want to do that. You got to stay on top of it. Otherwise, it's just going to compound itself and get worse and worse. The other beautiful thing about the objective approach is it's not, because this council member lives on that road or this volunteer or this staff person, it has nothing to do with where anybody lives. It's completely objective. Now, there's a good opportunity, like what we just did. The mayor mentioned Crestridge and Cemetery and all of those roads. They were all geographically located right by each other, so it made sense to go ahead and, like, one of those roads wasn't due for, I think, another year, but we went ahead and moved it up because you're geographically connected, and you save on mobilization costs and those kind of things. Hey, we've already got a good process going. Let's knock these out while we're here, kind of thing. So, does that help a little bit?
Perfect. Couldn't have said it better than myself. But a few other things to. Oh, please.
Well, I thought of one. I don't know if it was a question that was written down, but I did hear the question about benefits and health insurance specifically. We said that after 3 years, that employees' dependent health coverage is 100%. Just to qualify, that's the premium, of course. It's not the bills and everything else. There's still deductibles and all those kind of things. So the city isn't paying for, treatments and those kind of things. It's just the premium, just to qualify that.
Yeah, that's a great clarification. And a few things that we've been working on. So City Council recently approved a change that previously, if you had an asphalt road and you wanted to do a driveway, your driveway would have to be a concrete driveway, even though it connected to an asphalt road, which quite frankly doesn't make a lot of sense. If it's an asphalt road and you're looking to build a home on acreage to be more conducive, it should be asphalt to asphalt. And that's also a lot more cost cohesive for anybody that's wanting to build. And so speaking of asphalt roads, City Council recently approved a change that would allow it to be from asphalt to asphalt. One of the big things that City Council talked about previously, I guess it was at our last meeting, was in regards to what we're now calling Acre Lake. So the city back in 2019 purchased through general obligation debt 117 acres, which we've affectionately called the 117-acre regional drainage facility, which was a mouthful. And so this is land that is at the southwest corner of 1128 and Jordan. And so it's going to be, I believe, about 80 to 90 acres worth of detention, regional detention, that will, of course, primarily serve the flooding issues that can be seen along Highway 6 that also plagues the businesses. But there's also going to be a lot of other beneficial drainage improvements that come from that, and as well as recreation opportunities for park space. But one of the things that we've been trying to figure out is how do you pay and how do you fund the level of service that's needed to actually dig this out to make it what it needs to be. And we've had conversations with the drainage districts, and the drainage districts, rightfully so, because they cover big areas. They're like, we can do it. It's going to take a very, very long time. And we just think based off of the needs that the city has, it would be better for the city, while we can certainly help, to look at some other ways to fund this. So what we're going to actively look at doing, and we're going through the process right now, I don't know if it's an RFP, RFQ process, one of those two, would be actually partnering with a sand mining company in order to help us dig it out. The benefit of that is it doesn't cost the city anything, and there's also the potential that the sand that's mined out of that area could then be sold, and the city could actually make some money based off of the agreement that's entered into that would allow us to pay off the debt for the land instead of having to pledge the ad valorem, the property tax, to pay off the land. So there's a very unique opportunity that over the next probably 3 to 6 to maybe 9 months, we're going to have some big discussions about that. But that's an exciting opportunity. It's a much needed drainage project that's been stalled for a little while that we're starting to see a renewed attention to, and we're excited about the opportunities there. Anything else to add? Any other questions?
That was the last one, so thank you.
Yep, so we'll put this back here to the QR code for everybody and for information here. And so we're going to, myself and other council members, we're going to be hanging around if you guys have questions for us. We have City Hall that's open until 8 p.m., but at 8 p.m., the lights will go off, and we can certainly take the conversation outside to the parking lot. But I'll be here. We'll have other council members here, so please talk to us and ask us any questions that you have. But I appreciate each of you who are here in attendance for our first ever city budget town hall. And to those of you who are watching online, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So thank you, everyone. Take some cookies with you. Take some water with you. We have plenty. And y'all have a good night. Thank you.